Hey students, welcome to the Chapter 8 review for The Great Gatsby. So right now I'm sitting in my apartment and whoever lives below me is playing like old Fall Out Boy on full blast to the point where like I can feel the vibrations. So I think they're like going through something right now, like Great Gatsby levels of emotion to be blasting Fall Out Boy that loud. So hopefully everything's okay. But I thought I'd share it with you because I thought it was kind of funny. But yeah, so I'm going to not get distracted by the loud music, and I'm going to focus on The Great Gatsby instead and talking to you about Chapter 8. All right, so let's see what happens. So after the day's traumatic events, which is Myrtle's death and all the other drama that was accompanied with it, Nick passes a sleepless night. Before dawn, he rises restlessly and goes to visit Gatsby at his mansion. Gatsby tells him that he waited at Daisy's until 4 o'clock in the morning and that nothing happened. Tom did not try to hurt her, and Daisy did not come outside. Nick suggests that Gatsby forget about Daisy and leave Long Island, but Gatsby refuses to consider leaving Daisy behind. Gatsby, melancholy, which means very sad. It sounds like a happy word, but it's not. It means very sad. Tells Nick about courting Daisy in Louisville in 1917. He says that he loved her for her youth and vitality and idolized her social position, wealth, and popularity. He adds that she was the first girl to whom he ever felt close, and that he lied about his background to make her believe that he was worthy of her. Eventually, he continues, he and Daisy made love, and he felt as though he had married her. She promised to wait for him when he left for the war, but then she married Tom, whose social position was solid and who had the approval of her parents. And so Gatsby kind of shares the last he reveals the last secrets of the book about kind of like how him and Daisy met and why it didn't work out. And so let's take a look at the questions and review what's been shared. So what advice does Nick give Gatsby? So Nick advises Gatsby that he should get out of Dodge, that he should leave Daisy, forget about her, and kind of move on with his life. I think Nick realizes that Daisy could potentially destroy Gatsby, and Gatsby's his friend, and he's very worried for him. And so he's trying to persuade him to kind of move on with his life and find a different dream. But Gatsby refuses. Daisy's been his only dream for so long. He's built his entire life around trying to impress her. And he's not willing to let go of it. And so what are the various reasons why Gatsby fought so hard to win Daisy? So Daisy was the first girl he ever loved. She represents everything that he wanted in his own life: popularity, wealth, prestige. And also they made love. It's somewhat implied that they possibly lost their virginity to one another, and that Gatsby felt as though this meant that they were married, that they were promised to each other. And Daisy, however, while Gatsby was away at war, she marries Tom because Tom offers a level of stability that Gatsby never could. Gatsby lies about his past to make it sound like he could provide her a life of stability, but ultimately Daisy knows that's not true. And so she marries Tom instead, because what she cares about most is safety and stability and comfort. Those things are more important to her than true love. And so it's really interesting. Like, Daisy definitely comes off as looking like the bad guy. She kind of is the bad guy, or the bad girl. And so, but Gatsby, I mean, also the way he sees Daisy is a little bit problematic. I mean, he falls in love with her because of her, but also he even admits because of her popularity, her wealth, her prestige. It's the idea that Gatsby had a certain kind of life in mind for himself, and Daisy was the perfect kind of girl for the life that he wanted. And that almost kind of objectifies Daisy. It makes her an object within a life that Gatsby pictures for himself. And we know that that is the case because had he not objectified Daisy, he would have realized a lot earlier that she wasn't who he thought she was. But because she's so fixed in his mind as being this object of almost wealth, it's almost like she's money to him. There's actually a line in there where Gatsby says her voice sounds like money. It's the fact that he's objectified her as being part of this wealthy life he wants for himself. And so Gatsby's a little bit at fault for maybe being naive, possibly for using her. The relationship was definitely flawed. But Daisy's also done, honestly, in my opinion, far worse things. And so their relationship is over, and it kind of seems as though it was doomed for a very long time. So why could Gatsby not win Daisy? For all the reasons I just said. Yeah. So Gatsby's gardener interrupts the story to tell Gatsby that he plans to drain the pool. And this is because it's at the end of the summer. So keep in mind that this entire book has happened over one summer. So at the beginning of the book, it's early summer. Nick has just come to New York to enjoy well, he technically came to work for a job, but he really came to New York to enjoy the warm weather and have fun. And now it's the end of the summer and fall is coming. So talk about metonymy. So the oncoming of fall, what might autumn symbolize and foreshadow? So Gatsby's gardener interrupts the story to tell Gatsby that he plans to drain the pool. The previous day was the hottest of the summer, but autumn is in the air this morning, and the gardener worries that falling leaves will clog the pool's drains. Gatsby tells the gardener to wait a day. He has never used the pool, he says, and he wants to go for a swim. Think of the irony of that. Gatsby lives in this beautiful house with this huge, beautiful pool, and he's never swam in it. It's because he's never enjoyed himself, because he spent all these years only thinking of Daisy and never himself. So he's never even taken the time to do something for himself, like go for a swim. It's kind of sad. So Gatsby tells the gardener to wait a day. He wants to go for a swim. Nick has stayed so long talking to Gatsby that he's very late for work. Oh yeah, that's right. Remember, Nick actually has a job, which he has probably not been doing very well. He finally says goodbye to Gatsby. As he walks away, he turns back and shouts that Gatsby is worth more than the Buchanans and all of their friends. So in this scene, essentially, we see that Nick and Gatsby's friendship has survived the dramas and traumas of the previous night, and that Nick is worried for Gatsby. And there's almost this moment of like, well, maybe even though Gatsby's not willing to let go of Daisy yet, maybe as he goes for the swim, I mean, water can symbolize rebirth. Maybe he'll come out of the water and have a better perception of things. And we also get the sense that maybe Nick has finally pulled himself together. He's turned 30 after forgetting about his birthday, and he's now like, oh yeah, I have a job that I need to start focusing on. So we get the impression that maybe these two guys will start doing something with their lives other than kind of getting sucked into the drama created by people like Daisy Buchanan and Tom Buchanan. So at the beginning of what season does the book end? How is this symbolically significant? So it ends in autumn, and so autumn is when fall occurs. So when the leaves start falling off the trees, they start yellowing. There's even a scene in the book that describes Gatsby walking away underneath yellow leaves. And so we want to consider what that symbol might foreshadow, what it might mean, what autumn might symbolize. Why is it fitting that Gatsby is not ready for the summer to end? It's because the summer represents his love with Daisy. It's when they were in love again, and it's now over. And what does Nick mean when he shouts that Gatsby is worth more than the Buchanans and all of their friends? And so this phrase worth is really important. So, I mean, all of this book is built on the idea that kind of like wealth defines who you were in the Roaring 20s. If you were worth something, that meant that you had money and that you had power and prestige. And so when Nick says that Gatsby is worth more than the Buchanans, that means a lot in the 1920s. However, I think Nick means it in a different way. He's not saying, hey, Gatsby, you have more money than them. Hey, Gatsby, you have more power than them. He's talking about morality here. He's saying, you're a better person than the Buchanans, and your value is in the fact that you're good. And so this goes back all the way to the beginning of the book when Nick says that he doesn't pass judgments on people based upon his own sense of morality. And now here at the end of the book, after all the lessons that Nick has learned, he passes almost like an ultimate judgment against the Buchanans, where he says Gatsby is more moral than the Buchanans. And he passes this judgment. He shouts it out loud to Gatsby. And we see this like very important change in Nick's perspective. And we go back to the idea of a reliable versus an unreliable narrator for Nick. It may be your opinion changes at this point because Nick has changed at this point. Earlier in the book, was he reliable? Was he unreliable? At this point in the book, do you now perceive him as reliable or unreliable? What are your thoughts on him? Nick goes to his office, but he feels too distracted to work and even refuses to meet Jordan Baker for a date. The focus of his narrative then shifts to relate to the reader what happened at the garage after Myrtle was killed, the details of which Nick learns from Michaeli. George Wilson stays up all night talking to Michaelis? I need to look that up because I should know how to say that name, about Myrtle. He tells him that before Myrtle died, he confronted her about her lover and told her that she could not hide her sin from the eyes of God. So this is George Wilson talking to his wife. The morning after the accident, the eyes of Dr. T.J. Eckelberg, illuminated by the dawn, overwhelms George Wilson. He believes that they are the eyes of God and leaps to the conclusion that whoever was driving the car that killed Myrtle must have been her lover. He decides that God demands revenge and leaves to track down the owner of the car. He looks for Tom because he knows that Tom is familiar with the car's owner. He saw Tom driving the car earlier that day, but knows Tom could not have been the driver, since Tom arrived after the accident in a different car with Nick and Jordan. Wilson eventually goes to Gatsby's house, where he finds Gatsby lying on an air mattress in the pool, floating in the water and looking up at the sky. Wilson shoots Gatsby, killing him instantly, then shoots himself. So, why does Nick no longer want to see Jordan Baker? So Nick kind of clumps Jordan Baker together with the Buchanans, where he perceives her as being immoral and part of all the drama and trauma that's occurred, and he finds her to be careless. And so he doesn't want to have anything to do with her anymore. And so what inspires Wilson to kill Gatsby? So Wilson believes that whoever killed his wife must have been the man that she was having an affair with. And so because of that, he ironically eliminates Tom, who was the person having an affair with Myrtle. And he actually goes out and finds Tom and asks him who was the person driving. And this gives Tom an excellent out, and he says it's Gatsby. And so Tom places the blame on Gatsby, and Wilson, believing that Gatsby is the man having an affair, who had an affair with his wife Myrtle, and who killed his wife Myrtle, effectively ruining his life, he goes and kills Gatsby in revenge, and then he kills himself. And so everything's fixed for Tom. His mistress is dead. His mistress's husband is dead. The man that his wife fell in love with is dead. And he gets out of all of it without getting in trouble at all. And his and Daisy's life essentially go back to normal. And they have no repercussions for the lives that they have ruined. And so the symbol that I'm asking about here, how does this change the symbol's meaning? That's the symbol of the eyes of Dr. T.J. Eckelberg. So before Wilson makes the decision to do all this stuff, he looks up at the eyes of Dr. T.J. Eckelberg and perceives them as being God, telling him to do these things. And so I want for you to think about kind of like, what does the eyes of Dr. T.J. Eckelberg symbolize? What is that billboard? What is it supposed to mean in the novel? It symbolizes God to Wilson, but it actually has a bigger symbol in the novel than that to us readers. So ultimately, who is to blame for Gatsby's death? Let's pause right here and we'll talk about that in a very short video number 2 to follow.